From the world of AV programming and control with James King, I'm Steve Greenblatt, and this is Ask the Programmer. James, I'm glad we're back for another episode. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and it's always good to be here, Steve, as we talk about programming.
Absolutely. And one of the things that has come up quite a bit is what's the future for programmers and programming and is custom programming something that's going to continue to be a thing within the AV industry? It's had a great run, and it's been probably closing in on 30 years of really strong demand for programmers, but there's been a lot of change in whether it's configuration, which we've talked about in past episodes, or less of a need to have those what we refer to as bespoke systems. So what we wanted to talk a little bit about today is where does this leave programmers? Because a lot of people have put a lot of time and effort and energy and really hung their hat on this being a career. And depending on where you are, you need to kind of figure out what does the future look like. So we want to talk a little bit about what are the different career paths. And I'm a big believer in making yourself more of a specialist than a generalist. Even though you can do a lot of things, really try to focus on a couple of them so that you can really stick out, identify yourselves, and people will connect with you because of that. James, what have you found, or what are your thoughts actually about the future of programming and how programmers should navigate their career path?
So I'm thinking of this a little different than you would. I'm thinking the being a specialist is definitely a beneficial, but the way I look at it is a specialist who can be a generalist. And what I mean by that is someone who has the skills, the mentality, and the foresight to become specialists in not just one language. I mean, I know we mentioned this before, like COBOL, that was big out there for a lot of IT people, actually non-IT people too. That's what COBOL was for non-IT people. And it's a dead language. So if you only knew COBOL, you were out of a job when they got rid of COBOL. So yes, I agree being a specialist, but someone who go, okay, I'm a Python specialist today, but tomorrow I might be Ruby Rails. You got to be able to adjust to it.
Yeah, flexibility. I totally agree with you there, and that's a really great point. As I was saying that, I was thinking about the fact that it does go against the idea of being boxed in or painting yourself into a corner. What I was thinking more of is saying that I have a focus maybe in education, or I have a focus in certain types of projects, or even doing some type of back-end code that others are not doing. But being able to do any type of project, are you really an expert at any one of them, I guess, is part of the challenge. But great point there, and I totally respect that.
I see where you're coming from. So not being a specialist in a vertical, not a language. I think that is very key. That's a great point there, is finding your niche. If you're a corporate 500 company or Fortune 500 company, and that's what you can do, you can bang out these awesome conference rooms and do these elaborate high-end boardrooms. Make that your niche. If you can get into higher education, make that your niche. I agree. I think you are very on spot there.
Thanks. I appreciate that. And you are as well. And if we take that one step further too, one of the things that I've thought of, and in the past we had Patrick Murray on, and we've talked about different ways that programmers can evolve and pass along their knowledge. There are opportunities out there some are doing it. We do it in my company, and there's many others that are doing it too. Is writing utilities, writing either some of the complex code that others will use, and being able to resell that or provide that as a service, so that you're able to really hone in on what you do best, and others need that to be able to do their job better. But you're not necessarily doing the job. You're doing some of the behind the scenes work.
Oh yeah, the back end work is definitely a good area to focus on, and even the front end work. You don't always have to be a full stack. You can work on the front end, you can work on the back end. Those are two good areas to specialize in as well.
And I think what you were saying too, which we probably should elaborate on, is really understanding the clients. Being able to feel like you're connecting with them. And you say this all the time, which I really value. It's one of my takeaways from this is your job is to serve the students, and they're your client, and you need to make sure that their needs come first. And it's not about AV or cool programming. It's about the education that people are paying for, and these systems that we do serve that. So being able to understand that well, I think also helps. You do that through arming the educators with the tools that they need, but it's really being able to say, I have an expertise in understanding this area.
Oh yeah, I mean, as I just recently with this new job, I had a lot of meetings with stakeholders, and my whole pitch to them and is they shouldn't have to think about the technology. It should just come in and they should just work for them. The front end, the heavy lifting is done by my team to make sure that everything is in place, that when they come in the user rooms, it just works. And that's how I've always approached things. Yes, we run into issues. We know that with technology, but that's what I aim for. It's like, you shoot for the moons. If you don't make it, you're still on the stars.
Absolutely. So I
I,
think you
I
bring up a good point about, is there an opportunity for programmers to be looking at the more of a consultant's role, being specifying, defining what needs to happen, because that is a lot of the challenge. So then they could be handing it off to others who are writing the code and doing the implementation.
I think you have a good point there. There is a good chance for that, not only of hanging it off over to somebody, but also making sure that the end user, as you mentioned earlier about how I focus on the students, making sure the students' needs are being met, having that mindset where you're the voice of your end user um, could be good, because a lot of times these end users, they'll come in the meeting and be like, yeah, I don't know anything, just program it. You're the expert, just program it, make it work. I want the lights to turn on, whatever. Someone who can take what they're saying or what they actually need and actually understand what a program might be trying to throw in there, and be like, yo, you don't need to throw in the dishwasher into the lighting controls. Um, so being that middleman, being that voice, I think would be a good field for some programmers, especially the senior leads, to get into more of a customer facing role and being able to talk to them.
Yeah, because there's an advantage to having done this, and then being able to talk to a client and think through what they're asking, to know what's possible, what's not, guide them. And you can rely on your background and saying, hey, I've done this before. I may not be writing this code, but I could help to scope this out and write the blueprint for somebody else, so that you could have a successful outcome there. And as you said, being client facing could also be a big growth steps for some.
Oh yeah, and like we were talking about earlier, where you get into your niche, either a corporate or higher ed or resi, whatever, and being that voice, like for example, let's take me for example and say, okay, I've done programming for higher education. I've been in higher education for over 14 years. Another university can reach out and go, hey, James, we're going to hire this company to write programming for us. Can you just kind of look over the scope? Because we don't have an in-house programmer. Now I can be that voice because I have that knowledge. And now that university didn't have to spend so much money to have an in-house programmer knowledge there. They can leverage a colleague.
Yeah, it's kind of like being a client advocate.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good place for us to stop. Hopefully, our audience was able to get a couple of good tips there. But it is good for everyone to be thinking ahead and looking forward as to how they want to move their career forward. And if you have any ideas or if you have any rules or stories that you want to share of how you've evolved your career, please pass them along. We'd like to hear them and we'd like to talk about them some more. James, how can people get in touch with you and learn what you're up to?
As always, search me on the internet, AV_James King on Twitter. Find me Sunday mornings in the AV and AM hashtag. Great conversations there. Writer for the Higher Ed Digital Magazine, where I write the IT and AV column, and anywhere else on the internet you can find me.
Excellent. And for me, you can find me at Steve Greenblatt on social media, and Twitter and LinkedIn are probably the best bets. You can read my writing on AV Network as well as on my company blog at controlconcepts.net. And we do want to hear from you. So please keep the feedback coming. We'd love to be able to get this podcast out to more people. We know that there is an audience out there, and I'm sure that they can benefit from it. So if you be so kind, please share an episode or tell your friends and give us a rating or review. We would very much appreciate it. And with that, this has been Ask the Programmer.